Hey y'all, welcome everyone. It is so incredible to be with each of you tonight. I'm Brittany Packnett Cunningham, and I am so thrilled by this gathering of survivors for Kamala. Tonight is a moment of community building, of motivation, of hope in action, brought to you by some amazing organizations. We've got Survivors in Action, Survivors for Harris, the National Women's Loss Center Action Fund, Care in Action, and Survivor Justice Action. Now, first off, I gotta say, did you see the New York Times today? Because I know that's exactly why some of you are here. Full page, big type, more than 150 survivors speaking up to say hell nah to the person trying to worm his way back into the White House. And if you missed it, let me read you just a few of the powerful words from this letter that I and so many others were so proud to sign. It said, in part, a second Trump term would pose multiple dangers to our democracy, not the least of which is the dangerous daily message that it would send through his presence and his policies that sexual or gender-based violence of any kind is normal, unavoidable, and something that the American people should accept. We will not accept that. We demand better. And we believe that in this election, Vice President Kamala Harris is the right and the only choice for president. She will be an ally and partner in the ongoing work to end gender-based violence. I don't know about you all, but when I first read it, I got shivers down my spine because that's exactly how we should be showing up this election and every election. I loved it. I love a full page New York Times ad. And you know, Donald Trump loves a full page New York Times ad too, right? We all know what he was talking about. Ours is clearly a whole lot better. So yeah, what goes around, Donnie, it definitely comes around. But listen, tonight really is not about him. It's really and truly about us. So many of you on this call have had your own experiences that make this election incredibly personal. And I know what that's like. We've had really intense conversations on Undistracted, just like last week's episode with my dear sister, Drew Dixon. And we are both really feeling how hard this time is. So what you're going to do tonight, so what we're here to do tonight, rather, is to come together in power so that we can exercise the power of our votes, of our voices, and change the country, not just in 15 days, because yes, we've still got to get to that, but forever, because this work is ongoing. We've assembled an incredible program of speakers, including some of my personal heroes and 3 women who came forward about Trump, including one who's never told her story before tonight. And by the way, this is a big tent. There are people in this room who don't necessarily always work together, people from both sides of the aisle and across the political spectrum, but we are coming together to say that domestic, sexual, and gender-based violence impacts people in every community in America. It affects individuals, families, partners, every last one of us. And that for many of us, the choice this November is clear. Vice President Kamala Harris is the president that we need. So before we get started, I want to take a moment to point out that tonight's discussion, as you've already heard, will include sensitive topics, including sexual assault, domestic violence, gun violence, identity-based discrimination and harassment, and more. If you find yourself activated or needing extra support in response to some of this content, we'll be putting a link in the chat area for a website called Survivors Sanctuary. It has supportive tools and resources provided by the Me Too movement. And speaking of the Me Too movement, our first speaker tonight is the incredible, the indomitable Tarana Burke, renowned author, activist, community leader, my sister, and the founder of the Me Too movement. Please welcome, zooming in all the way from South Africa, where it is like 8 million o'clock in the middle of the night, my friend and yours, Tarana Burke. Hey, Tarana.
Hey, Brittany, and it's about 2 o'clock in the morning here in South Africa, but I could not miss this for anything. So I'm up along with my sister Monica, who you'll hear from in a little bit, just to bring a little bit of a message. You know, this endeavor that we now call in part Survivors in Action didn't start because of an election. It started because a group of us who believe wholeheartedly in the power of survival came together to build off of the idea that coalescing survivor power could change this country. with a vision for a political home for those who have experienced sexual and gender-based violence. We started this work back in 2019 with Me Too Voter, and the intention of creating a powerful voting bloc, because while knowing that there are nearly 500,000 new adult survivors a year in this country is staggering. It is also knowing that 500,000 people who understand in the deepest, most meaningful ways the breadth and depth of this issue are right here. These are people who also most often sit at the intersection of political, social, and economic insecurities. We are survivors who must wake up every single day and choose survival in a world that already puts us at the back of the line simply because we're Black or brown or gay or trans, cash poor, unhoused, mentally or physically disabled, incarcerated, unemployed, or undocumented. Some of Donald Trump's favorite people. But even with that reality, I meet and work shoulder to shoulder with survivors regularly who believe a different world, one that's rooted in healing, transformation, empathy, and justice, is possible. But what is not possible is any of our visions for the world, for that world, with a self-proclaimed prolific sexual harasser, convicted sex offender, and morally deficient leader at the helm of our country. We not only need leadership who will come to the table and move on our agenda, but one who sees value in the need for one. We need leadership that can stand in their word when they speak to us survivors and our loved ones and allies, because it's what they believe in or have a track record for and don't indulge in themselves. I do believe that survivors have power to shape elections and reshape the world. And this election is our chance to show that in force. There is no collective power greater than survivor power. The time to own that truth and let it guide our global mission to end sexual violence in every corner of the world where it exists, especially our corner, is right now. So I just want to say, like, tonight, as we hear from my sibling survivors and other allies on this call, those of you out there who have decided and are clear that Kamala Harris is the choice, your work is to spread what you hear tonight far and wide. And those of you who are on the fence and not sure, I'm just asking that you lean in and listen very carefully. You will hear about a lot of things that are at stake, from reproductive rights to workers' rights, and they are. Like, our material lives will be adversely affected if Trump is elected president, full stop. But the stakes are also high for our principles and our ethics and our values. There's a lot to be fixed in this country, but there is no place to start with a sexual predator as president. So that's what I came to say. Oh, and also to show my shirt. We got to grab them by the ballot. And that's what I'm hoping everybody does in 15 days.
Tarana, thank you so much for those powerful words, for that shirt that speaks 1,000 words, and as always, for your leadership. Now, really quickly, because she's also up late with Tarana, please welcome the acting deputy director of the Center for Migrant Rights, Monica Ramirez. Monica, passing it to you.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. As Brittany said, my name is Monica Ramirez, and you know, Tarana always reminds us of why we're coming together and why it's so important for us to continue to meet in places and spaces like these. And way back in 2019, when we were having conversations about what it would look like to organize survivors as a constituency, it wasn't just an idea, it was a clear need. We understood at that time that despite the fact that political leaders all across the country were saying that they were sorry about the violence they heard about, that had happened to millions of people who came forward, despite the fact that they said that they would take action, that they cared, that they were deeply concerned and moved. The reality is that far too few have taken the action that is required and necessary in order to win rights and justice for survivors. And it's more than just saying you're sorry. It's about taking action in order to remedy the situation. And so that was in part what was fueling some of the conversations around what it would look like to organize survivors as a constituency, because we understand our power. We understand that although something terrible has happened to us in our lives, we are powerful people who have the ability to make great change, and we are making great change. And part of that change is by taking everyday actions, very important everyday actions, like voting for people who represent us, who care for us, who will fight for us, who have a track record of doing so. And we know that Kamala Harris is that person. We know that she has that track record. And that is why it is so important for me to be here with you this evening. You know, 150 of us came together to join in signing the letter that Brittany spoke about earlier. And in that letter, we made clear that there is no other choice for who should lead our country and who should represent us, who will link arms with us as survivors, listen closely, and be moved to action, because that is what she has done over and over and over again. I come from the migrant farm worker community. I have been in community throughout the entirety of my life with migrant people, many of whom are immigrants. I live in rural America, a place where often people are left out and left behind. And what is at stake in this election is making sure that that does not happen again. We know what happened in the last administration when the policies were put in place to separate families, in which children endured great harm in detention facilities, in which women and others also endured this harm. We know what it would look like, and we cannot allow ourselves as a country to go back. And so I am here in representation of the people who I come from and the people who I have served my entire career to say that in order for us to make sure that we are protecting the people who we love and the people who we serve and the people who we come from, we have to continue to come together, to unite, to use our power to ensure that there is only one choice. And we don't have to wait 15 days. We can take action now. There are plenty of places around the country where early voting is taking place. So my ask to you is, please tell your family, tell your friends, make sure that they get organized, make sure that they know where they should be voting, and make sure that they take action. We need every single one of us to do our part. And we're so grateful to all of you for what you do every single day to fight for and with and alongside survivors. We're all counting on one another. That is what we do. We support, we love, and we come together as survivors in order to make the kinds of changes that are needed for this world. Thank you so much.
Monica, the thanks goes to you for your wisdom, for reminding us that everybody belongs in this fight because it affects all of us. And also for that important plug that if early voting has begun where you live, either by mail or in person, now is the time to make your voice heard. Thank you so much. Y'all, I mentioned before that we have 3 people with us who have come forward with stories of what they say the Republican presidential candidate has done to them personally. We're about to meet one of them. In December 2005, on assignment for People magazine, she went to Mar-a-Lago to interview Donald and Melania Trump. What she says happened next left her badly shaken. Please welcome New York Times bestselling author, Natasha Stoynoff. Natasha, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I want to speak a word about the fear of coming forward, especially when it's against a powerful man. I think there are many reasons why women don't come forward when they've been sexually assaulted. And one of them is that it's often a person in power, whether it's a boss, a parent, a teacher. And in my case, it was someone very famous who would then become what is considered the most powerful man in the world. When my incident happened in 2005, and I was interviewing Donald and Melania, he took me into a room, and I think you all know the story, pushed me against the wall, started kissing me. And when I got back to my workplace, I did not want to talk about it. I did not want to tell my boss about it. I just wanted to shove it under the rug. I wanted to go away. I didn't even understand that it was sexual assault, what he had done. I tried to minimize it, which is what many women do. And why? I was afraid of him, and I was afraid of what he would do. He was already known to be vengeful. He had a top-rated TV show at the time, and he was powerful in New York. I was just a journalist trying to do my job. So I said nothing. Not until 2016, when the fate of the nation was at stake, did I feel I could finally find some courage to come forward. But even then, I did not want to use my name. I wrote an essay for People magazine, and I said to my editors, do we have to use my name? Do we have to use my picture? Yes, we did have to do that because we needed to authenticate this story. But it was still a very frightening thing to do, afraid of what he would do. And this is why so many women don't come forward. Now we're 8 years after that, and about 20 years after the incident. And now you can find me everywhere this year. I am making videos. I'm with you here tonight. I'm speaking my name loudly and boldly and telling anyone who will listen what happened and why it's important that we speak out. I turned 60 in December this year, and I've decided that I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I think that it's very important for women to do what they feel comfortable when they're assaulted. They have to navigate what feels most comfortable for them. At the same time, honestly, I wish I could go back in time 20 years and speak to my younger self and help myself feel more comfortable and safer to come forward then, because I feel like I could have prevented other women from being hurt and maybe even prevented him from becoming president. Who knows? So I think that's important for us to find a way to help survivors feel safe to come forward. And I'll add one last thing, which is, what does it say to our next generation of women if we elect this man again? It says that when we do come forward, more than half the country doesn't care. And that's really upsetting. So we need to stay strong. We need to speak out. And we need to help each other speak out. And thanks for listening.
Natasha, thank you for showing up in courage and reminding us that choosing courage is a gift not only to one another, but to ourselves. You're a true light. Thank you. Next, I want to turn it over to a young woman we all saw walk on the stage at the Democratic National Convention this summer in Chicago. Hadley Duvall went through the hardest possible experience and has become a true warrior. Hadley, I want to hand it off to you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight. It is so important that you all are here. And it's so important that you take something from this call and you continue to share the message that we're here to give. So many people ask me, being such a young activist, I'm only 22. They asked me how I got started. I got started by using social media. That is the only thing that I knew to do when I felt like I had the strength to share my story. And that is what I did. And with that has come a family I have seen and grown into. I have grown into my confidence and speaking out, and I have been heard at a capacity like never before. And I never thought that making a Facebook post would lead to receiving a phone call from Kamala Harris before she was even running for president, when she was still vice president, or she still is, but before she was at the top of the ticket. And she wanted me to know that she heard me. We were going to sit down for an interview in a couple of days. She didn't want that to be the first time I was being vulnerable. And she wanted to have a conversation with me beforehand because she cares. And that was one of the most genuine things somebody could have done for me when it was my first time really speaking out on such a public stage. And that was so important that she saw me and she heard me. And I didn't even have to say anything in that moment, but she knew I would need some sort of reassurance. And I think that's really the big thing about speaking up, is you have to know that you have people backing you. You have people who will hear you and will lift up your message, and people do believe you. You have to find that strength to go to one person or two people, or maybe even your social media, whatever's in your comfort zone, and then it'll grow from there. And there's really no handbook to do it, but it's getting out there to using your voice. That's the strongest thing you have. Nobody can take that from you. It's using your vote, because what a privilege it is to feel as if you don't need to vote in this election. So we need to make sure everybody knows none of us are privileged. We have to vote. And, that's the biggest message I have tonight, is get out there, and if you don't use your voice anywhere, use it in the ballot box, and you know, take what you will from that and spread our messages. Thank you all for being here tonight, because that is one of the most important steps. But getting out there to between now and November 5th and placing your votes, that's the best and most important thing that we have to make sure everyone's doing. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Hadley, the thanks really goes to you. Thank you so much for your encouragement and the testimony of your life, the way that you stand up and stand out for yourself, for all of us. It's truly an inspiration. Thanks for being here tonight. Listen, we know that we're talking tonight about how critically important it is to use your vote as your voice. And we also understand that we all have different needs, and using that vote might not be as safe as possible from one person to the next. So a few resources coming to the chat right now for you. One, we've just reshared the Survivors Sanctuary link in the chat in case anyone needs it. I also want to note that for anyone feeling that they might be living in an unsafe situation, Survivors for Kamala has put together a safe voting guide that includes resources that can help you exercise your right to vote in a private way. You should know that for many states, this includes confidentiality programs, and this safe voting guide includes the addresses and the links to those confidentiality programs. Also in the chat box is a link to the National Domestic Violence Hotline voting guide. So make sure that you're using those resources and that you're sharing them with folks who may not have been able to join us tonight, but you know might need them. Joining us now, an advocate for reproductive rights and a United Nations Foundation keynote speaker. Please welcome Sinclair Warren. Sinclair?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thank you all for being here. There is a certain sympathy that I wish I could possess rather than this empathy that has been imposed onto me. It is an absolute understanding that I do not wish upon anyone. When I was 3 years old, I was abused by a family member. And then later I was raped by an intimate partner when I was 16. For years, I felt so alone. I didn't have the words to describe what happened to me. Without the language to express it, I internalized it, and it became a source of shame and low self-esteem. It wasn't until I shared my story that I realized that what happened to me wasn't my fault and that I wasn't alone. I don't believe that anyone grows up with the hopes of surviving anything. I know I didn't. What happened to me wasn't my choice, but how I choose to live my life now is. This election is particularly important to me because it directly relates to reproductive rights, an issue that I hold so dear to my heart because I had an abortion 4 years ago. The ability to make choices about our own bodies is fundamental to our freedom and empowerment, especially as survivors. Voting is our opportunity to advocate for policies that protect these rights and ensure that everyone has the autonomy to make decisions about their own lives. By casting our votes, we can help create a future where no one has to suffer in silence and where everyone has control of their bodies and their futures. So let's use our voices and stand up for what matters. Your vote is your voice, and let it be heard. Thank you so much.
Sinclair, thank you for that clarion call and reminder to all of us that our vote is indeed our voice, and we've got to make sure that we use it. Now I'm going to pass it to a woman who has also spoken about her experience that she says she had with Donald Trump. Please welcome Alva Johnson. I think you're still on mute, and we want to make sure we can hear you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the many women who have come forward to say that Donald Trump harassed or harmed us. We call ourselves the Sisters of the Strange Sorority, united by one predator. It means a lot for me to be here with so many of them and also with so many of you. I have a feeling that there are many listening who are part of their own strange sororities too. My corporate background is in human resources leadership, and I eventually segued into my passion of producing large-scale events as a small business owner. My work and reputation as an event producer led me to working on events and rallies for Donald Trump early in the 2016 Trump campaign. One day in Florida, I found myself on the receiving end of a very unexpected and unwanted kiss. The boundaries I had worked so hard to establish with my colleagues were suddenly destroyed. "Oh, you're the only one to get a kiss from the boss," was the way that they would tease me and taunt me. Like it was some privilege or like I should have been flattered, but I wasn't. I was disgusted, I was embarrassed, and I was uncomfortable. And once the Access Hollywood tape came out, it confirmed the initial feelings I felt when it happened. And I immediately left the campaign. In retaliation, because I dared to speak out and hold him accountable, he took me to arbitration for violating a non-disclosure agreement, which stated that for a lifetime, I am unable to criticize him. For years, I had the sitting president of the United States using his legal team to try and suppress my First Amendment rights as a private citizen through arbitration. And you should know that there were hundreds of people who signed NDAs on that campaign. But I am only aware of 4 of us who were taken to arbitration for violating the non-disclosures. We are all women. We are all women of color. And 3 of the 4 had incidents of inappropriate sexual behavior during our times with the campaign. We had to fight separately, but we eventually won. And it wasn't until 2022 that that the NDA was deemed unconstitutional. And that's one thing I want to emphasize tonight in this election. Many of us who have come out against him just can't believe that here we are again. But we have decided to continue to fight, despite knowing that I am on his enemies list. I know from my experience that when Trump talks about silencing his enemies, he means it, and it is very real. And as president again, he will have legal power to retaliate against many people he's angry with. And we all know that he does not like women who dare to hold him accountable and who dare to speak their truth. I'm often asked, what does it feel like to see him campaigning for the presidency again? I think for most of us, the sisters of the strange sorority, it feels like a nightmare that just doesn't end. I like to describe it, I feel like I'm at Camp Crystal Lake. You all know from like the Friday the 13th horror movies. And I feel like, you thought Jason was dead, but then right when you want to breathe a sigh of relief, here he comes again. But I'm telling you this much, okay? I'm going to write a new ending to this movie. We all are going to write a new ending to this movie. We're going to move forward together. We're going to do everything we can to keep him out of office. We will continue to tell our stories. It's important to mobilize, to organize, to knock on doors, to make phone calls, and to encourage everyone not just to vote, but to vote blue all the way down the ballot. We're going to do everything we can to get Madam Vice President elected. That's the new ending that I believe in, and I want that for all of us here. The prosecutor defeats the predator, and we're going to help make sure that it happens. I wish healing for us all, and may we provide a hedge of protection for those who are still silently suffering. Thank you.
Alva, thank you. We join you on that enemies list very proudly, and we also join that hedge of protection for one another. Thank you so much. Speaking of that hedge of protection and making sure that we're telling those stories that really pierce the culture and move us forward, please join me in welcoming a woman that was one of the very first people to speak publicly about Harvey Weinstein back in 2017. She is the accomplished actress, humanitarian, and always an activist, Ashley Judd. Ashley, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, y'all. Good evening from Leapers Fork, Tennessee. So good to see my sisters, Tarana and Monica. Thank you to everyone who's here and speaking out. I am sitting in front of a beautiful mosaic called Dragon Slayer. That seems suitable. And I am a wounded healer and leader, a survivor of patriarchal sexual violence. And about that, I have no shame. I just want to call out Gloria Steinem, who always teaches us that we are linked, not ranked. And I'm deeply grateful to be in this circle of fellowship and community together with y'all and my pastor, Betty, and wise chosen sister, Amanda. And sharing our stories about why we are voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is an invitation to healing from patriarchal wounding, male entitlement to female bodies. Because healing our bodies and our stories, which are subjugated to male dominance, especially white male entitlement, to our very beings and lives, is a political act. It is personal, it is political, and our stories help create policy. And I want to specifically call out our culture around male entitlement and the ecosystems that continue to enable it. This administration, the administration we are going to vote in, will have a different culture. And I also want to call out the purity culture that continues to shame and narrowly define women's identities and possibilities. We have a distinct choice to make here. And the fallacy, PH fallacy, of the male protection rabbit, this elaborate lie and the whole systems that go around it, that we women need some safe men to protect us from men who are not safe, when in fact, when we share our stories with each other and have female to female alliances and vote for Harris Walz, we advance female liberation and freedom from male aggression, overt and covert, subtle and obvious. We don't need the male protection racket. We need each other to help incentivize us to be safe and to tell our stories. This is deep work. Healing myself is taking radical responsibility for my own narrative. I take my story of male sexual violence, and by the alchemy of this vulnerable courage, supported by female to female alliances, that painful stories becomes a redemption story, a story of voice, of boundaries, integrity, boldness, and sisterhood. But I can't transmit what I don't have. And the trauma that we don't transform in ourselves, we will transfer to others. So we all have to take this journey of hurting, healing, and then helping. So we tell our story to ourselves, to other women in sacred and safe community. And then it is this personal experience that becomes our public leadership. Our bodies are our evidence, and our stories are our public leadership. And our values are our feelings. You know, values are not abstract concepts, they are feelings, and we can share them with precision and clarity and soul. All of this is valid. It is okay to feel our stories in public, and we take those to the ballot box. And I also want to say we honor ourselves first, remembering that we keep our own safety and pacing and tempo in mind. We never re-injure ourselves along the way as we share our stories. We matter. It's okay to do what we can when we can, because we know we're not the first person he molested, and we won't be the last. If you can't tell your story now, that is okay. Your time will come. We do it for ourselves. We do it for our sisters. We do it for all women. We do it for our liberation. So I hope that this makes some sense to you. And I just want to say something very briefly. There is a species of ape called a bonobo. Everyone knows about chimpanzees. Bonobos are actually our closest living relatives. They are the least known, least studied, least financed, least researched of all the great apes. We are more like them than chimpanzees. They have eliminated male sexual violence. They have reproductive autonomy. They are matriarchal and egalitarian. All female bonobos help all female bonobos all the time, whether or not they're related, know each other, or like each other, which can be measured by things like grooming and sharing valuable resources. It was mentioned this is a wide tent. There are women of all kinds here. We all need to be bonobos and help each other. And that's one of the reasons why we need to vote for Walz and Harris, because we know the alternative will be a major setback for women of all kinds. Female to female alliances encourage each other, support each other. I love you. Peace be with you. Thank you for letting me be here tonight.
Ashley, thank you so much. I don't know a lot about bonobos. Thank you for teaching us all of that. But I do know, as you said at the very beginning when you were quoting our sister Gloria Steinem, also what Aboriginal activist Lilla Watson said, that if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because you know our liberation is bound up with one another's, then let us work together. Thank you for reminding us always to work together. I want to bring another woman into this conversation who, for many of us, was the first introduction and a major introduction into what it looks like to engage in that sisterhood, even through trauma and certainly in triumph. If you can turn on your camera, I want to bring in lawyer, educator, and author Anita Hill, who is a professor of social policy, law, and women's studies at Brandeis University, and a woman who has understood the assignment from day one. Please welcome the Professor Anita Hill. Professor Hill, if you don't mind lowering your camera just a little bit, I think we can see
I
you.
just realized that you were only looking at the top of my ceiling.
If you come back on camera, we had you and you just lower it just a little bit. That's perfect. It's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany, for that introduction, and thank all of our speakers for their wise words and really comfort in this really tenuous time. I'm just going to start with a little bit of history and start with about 33 years ago. And no, this is not about me, not exactly about me, but this is about a group of 1,600 women calling themselves African-American Women in Defense of Ourselves, who changed the public conversation about gender-based violence. Now, they did it like we do today by putting ads in the New York Times. They put ads in the Washington Post and in 7 Black newspapers throughout the country. And they did it in response to the Senate's ignorance of gender violence during the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearing. And their approach was pointed and clear. They taught us, the world, that in order to understand gender violence, society needed to understand its history and the various ways that Black women experienced it then and even today. Their collective impact was extraordinary, and it opened the door for diverse conversations about violence, race, and gender, and sexuality and gender identity from so many different fronts and so many different corners. It opened the door really for us to fully understand and get our arms around this problem and our arms around each other as survivors. Their impact, and I believe the impact of the conversation following the hearing in 1991 and their entry into the stage, the impact was so much that in 2018, a group of men of different races copied their format in support of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. The ad that they submitted gave us new language and welcomed countless survivors and their allies into the conversation. Many people reading that ad, regardless of whether they were African American or some other race, whether they were women or identified as men, that ad gave each of us new language and welcomed countless survivors and their allies into a conversation that has become full and robust now. And I'll just add this, you know that we have made progress. That ad contributed to their progress, but you know we made progress when a group of men adopt Black feminism as their model. So we can move forward today knowing that we are surrounded by people who have the will and have the energy and the information to move us to where we need to be to end gender violence. And on a quick other note, I just have to say that it's been an amazing few months since July. Since July, Kamala Harris has been a steady voice, a voice for progress in the face of heinous attacks on just about everything that has to do with her, and more, and even more on things that have nothing to do with her. She's been attacked about her competence. She's been slandered in terms of her integrity. She's, at every move, she's or she's faced with these claims and accusations, as I said, that have very little to do with her. I mean, even something as simple as whether or not she had worked at McDonald's as a teenager has become fodder for Donald Trump's attack on her. But yet, Harris has continued to bring more voices to the conversation about the direction this country should be taking. And those voices are followers who will continue to move us forward when she's elected to be the president of the United States. You know, I say that one voice can spark a movement, and I do believe that. But I also know that it takes a collective of diverse voices and perspectives to fuel and sustain change. We can be that collective. We have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the will, and we've gotten the encouragement to do so with the nomination of Kamala Harris. I am so proud to be part of this ad, and I'm a bit like Brittany myself. I really did get chills when I read that ad in the paper, knowing how many people it would reach. Today, in pledging our support for Kamala Harris, we set the stage for greater collaborations around the many issues that imperil our bodies. And there are many, but they're also not only imperiling our bodies, but they are imperiling our political power. And we need to be a hedge against that happening. We are varied and we are diverse. And we each have a vision for how to end gender violence. And together we can make it real. That and so much more is well within our capacity. So I will just close by saying, again, I am proud to be part of this ad. I've seen what ads and stepping up in troubled times can do. And I honestly know in my heart that when we come together, we are unstoppable. So thank you. And don't forget to vote. Thanks.
Wow, such an honor to be with all of you. Such an honor to hear from you, Anita. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy Caldwell. It's been an honor to play a small part in making this call come together in recent days. I'm a former Republican, and I've spent the last 5+ years of my life working to defeat Donald Trump because I think he's an existential threat to our American democracy. I'm also a survivor myself. As I said, I started out as a Republican. I got my start in Republican politics. I rose up fast in my career. I felt proud of the fact that I was seen as a strong and powerful professional woman from early on. I was someone who stood up for other people, for the people who worked for me. I was proud that I could be counted on to call out wrongdoing. But then I found myself in a prolonged and painful situation where I was not able to stand up for myself, where my power was taken away from me. And when I did try to do something about it, I was gaslit. I was shamed. I was blamed. And it's surreal to be on the call with Tarana tonight because I have a vivid memory of waking up on the morning of October 16th, 2017, which was my 30th birthday, and reading in the New York Times about the hashtag #MeToo going viral and thinking, maybe I don't have to keep enduring this. And I wish I could tell you that that was the end of it, that spurred me right then and there to get relief from what I was going through, and it didn't. But the stories that the Me Too movement brought to the surface did buoy me, and ultimately, sometime later, did help me to come forward, help me to find people to believe me, people who helped me. So I hope that tonight, if there are people listening in that situation, there are people out there who will help you too. And I do want you to know that. As a political operative, as a creature of Washington, D.C., one of the things that was hardest for me in the aftermath of my experience was seeing people who I knew what I'd been through, continuing to socialize with the person who'd done that to me as if it hadn't happened, because access and networking, opportunities, whatever, schmoozing. And I made a commitment to myself that I would never be someone to go schmooze the men or the people that I knew were abusers, were sexual assailants, that I wouldn't do that because I understand. And I understood then that that would be to not acknowledge the lived experiences of other survivors. I cannot imagine how brutal it must feel to watch the person who sexually assaulted you get platformed on such a massive stage as the presidency. I am so bowled over by the bravery of the survivors who've come forward to share their stories of being abused by Donald Trump. In recent weeks, I've gotten the opportunity to get to know Stacey Williams. And some of you may know her name because she is an 8-time Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition model. She's a supermodel. She is also an incredible person with an amazing wit, and she has such a generous spirit. And I'm really not exaggerating when I say that Stacey's warmth and magnetism makes me feel like I've known her for years. And Stacey also has a story about Donald Trump, and she's going to share it on this very public stage for the first time with us now. Stacey, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. I'm going to start to cry before I even get to speak. I am so in awe of all of you and so deeply moved, but I have to concentrate on what I have to say here. So I'm going to get right into it. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and my senior year of high school, I was discovered at the mall, because where else were we all hanging out in the late 80s, by a former model. And that led me to New York and Europe and a long, lucrative career as a model. And in 1992, my agent invited me to a dinner to a restaurant on the Upper East Side of New York. And there were other models there and the usual men hangers-on at this dinner. And one of the men who was sitting at this table was Jeffrey Epstein. And I had never heard of him or anything, but we got to know each other, and we talked a lot about Clinton and Gore. And I enjoyed the fact that he was politically engaged and wasn't infantilizing me and talking to me about that. The next time that I saw Jeffrey was a few months later in December of 92 at Donald Trump's Plaza Hotel Christmas party. And it became very clear then that he and Donald were really, really good friends and spent a lot of time together. After that, Jeffrey Epstein expressed a lot of interest in me, and we started seeing each other. When Jeffrey and I would talk, he mentioned Trump frequently. He was clearly a close friend, and they were spending a lot of time together. Late winter, early spring of 93, I was on a walk with Jeffrey from his brownstone on the Upper East Side down Fifth Avenue, when Jeffrey looked at me and said, let's go stop by and see Trump. And so we went to Trump Tower and went up the elevator, and moments later, Trump was greeting us, and he pulled me into him and started groping me. He put his hands all over my breasts, my waist, my butt, and I froze. And I froze because I was so deeply confused about what was happening, because the hands were moving all over me. Yet these two men were like smiling at one another and continuing on in their conversation. Jeffrey and I left, and I got into the elevator with him, and I felt this, like, he didn't look at me. He didn't speak to me. And I felt this like seething rage around him. His whole energy shifted. And when we got down to the sidewalk, he looked at me and started just berating me. He kept saying, "Why did you let him do that? Why did you let him put his hands all over you? What?" And he made me feel so disgusting. And I remember at that moment being so utterly confused. Number one, I thought, well, yeah, why did I let him do that? And then I was confused because, well, but why is Jeffrey mad? Because he's the one that took me up there. And I was also confused because I was someone who really prided myself as being sort of one of the tough models who was problematic because I fought back against the predators in the industry. I defended fellow models on the streets of Paris when we would be grabbed or harassed. So how did I let that happen? I felt so humiliated and so sick to my stomach and was so upset. And as I absorbed what happened a few minutes later, I felt like that was some sort of sick bet or game between the two of them. I was rolled in there like a piece of meat for some kind of challenge or twisted game. And I felt horrendous. And not long after that, a postcard of Mar-a-Lago was couriered to my agent. And there was a personal message on the back from Donald Trump. I still have that postcard, and it makes me sick to look at it. And it takes me back to that feeling of confusion and being frozen and humiliated. And that is why I am here tonight. I figured it was time to share this, and I'm ready to win this election. The thought of that monster being back in the White House is my absolute worst nightmare. So thank you very much for including me in this like remarkable group of women. Seriously, I'm honored.
Stacey, our thanks goes to you. I hope that you know from what you can see in the chat and hopefully what you can feel coming to you, that there is deep gratitude for the courage and the bravery that you have shown us tonight, for the care that you are taking for this sisterhood, to be ready to tell your story. Because as Ashley said before, there is no timeline that people can dictate to you. And so many of us understand the sacrifice of what it means to share it publicly. And yet so many of us cannot possibly understand what it means to share something so publicly about someone who sits atop the ticket. Unfortunately, as was already shared by Alva, too many of you are a part of that sorority. But we thank you for allowing us to be a part of your survivor sorority. And we are just deeply grateful and moved and motivated to make sure that your worst nightmare and our worst nightmare never, ever comes true again. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We are with you every step of the way.
Oh, I know that. Thank you.
Oh, wow. I don't know about the rest of you all, but that was real and harrowing and as honest as it gets. And a reminder to all of us of what is at stake. You have heard from many different people tonight, people who come from all sides of the aisle, across the political spectrum, from across the country, and who are currently across the world. And unfortunately, what binds us so often is the assault and harassment that we faced. But what we are determined to ensure binds us forever is our fight and our determination to win, not just an election, but to win the kind of liberation that ensures that sexual and domestic and gender-based violence ceases once and for all, and all of us can live in the kind of peace, liberation, and freedom that every single human being deserves, especially you, especially me. I want to continue to talk about the real lives of people who have been affected by sexual violence and why this election is so important to all of us, both the groups that are represented here and the individuals who have been so brave to share their stories. Here from Kansas is one of the founders of Survivors for Harris, Zachary Mallory. Welcome, welcome.
First of all, hello to all of you. I'm deeply motivated, deeply excited to be here with every single one of you. Every single one of us has a story. that deserves to be heard, regardless of what they try to tell you, regardless of what they try to tell you is wrong with you, that they don't believe you. So hello, I am Zachary Mallory. I am queer, I am non-binary, and I am a survivor. I am a thriver, and I'm here for a reason. I founded Survivors for Harris because we needed to have a voice. I founded Survivors for Harris because I seen a need to do something. So I did. I reached out to a cat ladies group on Facebook, and then it turned into a whole national conversation, which has led every single one of you to being on this Zoom call tonight. And I am honestly forever grateful to be in this room with so many deeply impactful people. We are here for a reason. We are survivors. We are allies. We are organizations that are doing the work on the ground to make sure that our rights and our voices do not go silenced. Our vice president created the very first office of gun violence prevention. That is a huge moment in our nation's history to understand that survivors from domestic violence, gun violence, sexual assault, there is an intersectional piece that is oftentimes overlooked. And whenever we recognize the intersectionality, we can truly tackle the ongoing epidemic. Whenever our elected officials are sitting in their offices doing absolutely nothing, they are saying it is completely okay for violence to continue happening. We need to shatter that narrative. Survivor voices need to be at the forefront of every single movement, every single policy decision. Vice President Harris, whenever she is elected on November 5th, she will do exactly that and so much more. Without further ado, this human being inspired me, inspired all of us, and I'm tongue twisted, as you can tell. I want to introduce to you now someone who has inspired all of us to do something. Harris got her start, and you want to know why? This person I'm about to introduce is exactly why. Wanda, I'm grateful for you. You are here. I believe you. I see you. We all hear you. We all see you. We love you. Thank you for being here. Truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me. Can everyone hear me?
You sure can.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm in awe over listening to everyone and everyone's strength and everyone's stories and different reasons for sharing their platform. And I just want to thank you for all inviting me to join you. So I am a sexual assault survivor. And for some of you who may not know my story, I'm a sexual assault survivor because I was rescued many years ago, over 40 years ago, by Vice President Kamala Harris herself. The tell someone, I say, is all it takes is telling that one person. And so when I was being sexually assaulted by my stepfather, I worked up the nerve to finally tell her, and she took me in to live with her. And I lived with her as she advocated for me. And I shared my story and what I'd been through actually a few years back. But then with her having the ticket now and having so much at stake, and especially with women's rights, women's reproductive rights being the top of the ticket, I decided that it was time to share my voice even louder. Like Hadley had mentioned, she used social media and embraced social media. I was actually really afraid of social media, but I've learned to embrace it. I've learned to welcome my voice and use my voice to help to empower other women to speak up, to help to empower people that are undecided or don't know where they want to vote, who have questioned her integrity. I mean, no one can speak better about her integrity than me. She was the person that she was, fighting for people's rights over 40 years ago when she was fighting for my rights to do what I wanted with my body. So I'm so proud to be a part of this platform, to be able to tell everyone the kind of person that she is, and to get out there and vote, because that's really how important it is for everybody to vote and to have their voices heard and to use your voice as your power. Thank you.
Wanda, we thank you for joining us tonight, for sharing your personal story and testimony about the vice president, and also for the testimony of your triumphant life. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, we've heard all night that these issues are interconnected: queer rights, reproductive justice, gun violence, domestic issues. When it comes to the topic of care, most certainly this sits at the foundation. I'd like to remind all of you that if you need additional care while you are on this call, to go into the chat and see that link for Survivors Sanctuary for additional support should you need it. And now, to continue that conversation about how we care for one another and how care shows up in policy, we welcome labor leader, author, and president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance to keep us grounded in people's lives, Ai-jen Poo.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm so proud to be here in my personal capacity and as a survivor. Just so proud to be a part of this incredible lineup of leaders. And as an organizer who has worked with hundreds of women who survived sexual harassment and violence as domestic workers working in the care economy, it's just so important that we're coming together in this moment when our votes and our voices could truly determine the future of care and support survivors have for generations to come. And I just want to recognize and lift up the domestic workers who might be tuning in tonight. I've just borne witness to the courage of domestic worker survivors for more than 25 years, and just know how the extreme imbalance of power of working in someone else's home, how the work is undervalued, isolated, there's no coworkers, no HR staff. There's a long history of exclusion from basic rights and protections. This environment, which is a workplace for more than 2 million women, creates extreme vulnerability to abuse and harassment, so much so that everyone has a story that will break your heart. And despite all of that, there's so much pride and dignity in care and in care work, because the women who do this work know that the work of caring for children, for older people, people with disabilities, is essential work. It's essential to our humanity, to the dignity of others. It's essential to our economy, and it makes it possible for literally millions of working parents and caregivers to go to work with dignity every day, knowing that their loved ones are in good hands. And they need and deserve care too. So we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to elect a leader who not only sees the dignity in all work, but wants to end the kind of vulnerability that happens when you work in a part of the economy that's devalued. She wants to address and really end the vulnerability to abuse facing so many women in the workplace. And she wants to make sure that we have the care that we need to take care of ourselves and the people we love. As Vice President Harris was the lead sponsor of the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And ever since that day, and even before that day, she has fought to invest in the care economy to make sure that all of us, including survivors, have the ability to afford the care that we need for ourselves and the people we love. She's been championing historic investments in care to make childcare, senior and disability care more affordable, to establish paid family and medical leave so we can take time away from work to heal or to take care of ourselves or the people we love. Vulnerability to sexual violence comes down to toxic power imbalances where the lives and contributions of some of us are valued and supported at the expense of others. And this is our moment to show our power as survivors for a new way forward, as people who believe that freedom, our economic freedom, our reproductive freedom, our freedom to live free from violence should be our future. So let's do this, y'all.
Jen, always coming with the vision and with the receipts. We appreciate you so much. Our next speaker had a job you may not believe anyone had to actually do, and was one of the people being on the front lines of ensuring that the workplace is safe. She was a sexual assault response coordinator for the U.S. Marines during the Trump administration. Please welcome Alyssa Cierley Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Alyssa Cierley Johnson, and thank you for the introduction. I served in the United States Marine Corps as both a C-130 transport pilot and also a sexual assault response coordinator under the Trump administration. And I left the active duty service 5 years ago, and it's taken me this long to finally come forward about how my experiences impacted my perspective on leadership, especially under Trump. As a SARC, I was the first responder for survivors, the person that they called when they needed immediate help. My job was to guide them through their reporting options, explain their rights, and provide confidential support in some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. But as I performed this role, I myself stayed silent about my own experiences. For years, I carried the weight of other survivors' stories, all while burying my own pain out of fear of not being believed or of reprisal. It wasn't until I left the military that I finally found the courage to report my own assault. And even now, speaking up feels like one of the bravest things I've ever had to do. And I've had to fly aircraft into war. And the emotional stakes are very real. Advocacy, especially in these situations, requires a tremendous amount of empathy, patience, and emotional strength. Now, imagine being a survivor and walking into work every day and seeing a photo of Donald Trump hanging on the wall as your commander-in-chief. He is your boss, and knowing the things that he said and he's done. That photograph, which hung on the wall of my office, that I had to speak with survivors about their cases, was a constant reminder of his bragging about grabbing women by the pussy as if their bodies were his to take. And for survivors like me, for advocates like me, seeing Trump's face every day sent a clear and devastating message. Our pain didn't matter, and accountability wasn't a priority. As a SARC, I could walk into a room and immediately recognize who the victims were and who the perpetrators were. Day after day, I worked alongside both, knowing that survivors were forced to sit across from their abusers, perform their duties as if nothing had happened, and suppress any discomfort or discontentment just to survive. The emotional weight of that silence was immense. Leadership shapes culture. It's not just about policy, but it's about setting the tone for how people are treated within an organization. And under Trump's presidency, his words and behavior undermined the Department of Defense's sexual assault prevention and response program, shifting the culture dramatically. The SAPR program was built to provide a path towards justice and healing for survivors. But with a leader who openly dismissed survivors' experiences and devalued the role of advocates, SAPR's efforts were undercut. And these effects were immediate and palpable. You could hear it in the hallways, the shift in how people talked to one another and interacted with each other. It was as if with each passing day, it became harder to advocate effectively within a system that was no longer committed to accountability. And this is why leadership at every level matters. The commander-in-chief sets the tone, not just for policy, but for the culture that influences every rank, every workplace, and every survivor's experience. In a world where survivors already struggle to come forward, leadership can either empower them to seek justice or push them into further silence. We cannot be silenced. To my fellow survivors, I see you, I hear you, your stories matter, and you are not alone in this fight, even if sometimes it feels that way. I know how heavy it can be to carry trauma and how isolating it can feel when the system doesn't, seem to be built to support you. And to everyone else, I ask that you reflect on how leadership shapes the lives of survivors and marginalized communities. This election isn't just about politics. It's about protection, safety, dignity. It's about choosing leaders who create a culture of empathy, accountability, and safety, not ones that embolden perpetrators and silences survivors. I urge you to cast your vote for Vice President Harris in honor of survivors and to support the leadership that values human dignity and justice. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Allison Gill, a survivor, an author, an award-winning podcast host, and a United States Navy veteran.
Oh my gosh, can everybody hear me okay? I'm truly overwhelmed and honored to be here among all of you. Imposter syndrome alert is very high tonight. But I think it's so important, you know, Sinclair, you were right about the power of not being alone and not feeling alone. Alyssa, you'd mentioned it too. So thank you all for sharing your stories. Being among you is truly I mean, it's an honor of a lifetime. And Alva Johnson, you were so right in saying we all belong to some strange sorority. And my strange sorority is survivors of military sexual trauma. 29 years ago, while I was serving in the Navy, I was drugged and violently raped. And that crime resulted in an unwanted pregnancy. Now, at the time, because of the protections of Roe v. Wade, I was able to seek reproductive health care in Florida, where I was stationed. And when Trump's Supreme Court overturned Roe, I was immediately worried about all of the service members literally trapped in states with abortion bans on the books, states where they might be forced to carry their rapists' babies to term because rape was so prevalent in the military. So I decided to share my story with the Washington Post. I wrote an op-ed, and a few months later, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris enacted a policy that grants leave, no questions asked, to service members and their families so that they can travel to get the reproductive health care they need. Now, and we know the next president of the United States could appoint as many as 3 new Supreme Court justices. But if Donald Trump returns to office, we also know that he and his Republican lapdogs in Congress, I'm thinking specifically of Tommy Tuberville, will repeal this policy. He blocked military promotions to get this policy revoked. And that will strand our active duty service members and their families in states that will deny them access to life-saving reproductive care. And if there's a national abortion ban like they want in Project 2025, everybody will be trapped. And Trump's Project 2025 would also strip me and other veterans of their health care benefits, because if you experience military sexual assault, they're not going to consider that a disability anymore. So that's one of the reasons I've been campaigning for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. She will protect our fundamental freedoms, whether you're in the military or not. But she also needs a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate to get this done. And so on November 5th, we have to make sure we vote for Democrats all the way down ballot, because the Senate appoints the Supreme, or confirms the Supreme Court justices. If she wants to codify Roe, we will need a majority in the Senate and the House. And also, to those who might be watching, who may be going through what I went through 29 years ago, again, I want to reiterate that you're not alone. And that's why I'm so honored to be here again with all of these brave survivors, because when you realize you're not alone, they can't gaslight you anymore. My Twitter DMs are open at Mueller, She Wrote. Please feel free to reach out if you need anyone to talk to, because you're not alone and we're not going back. Thank you again so much for having me, everyone.
Alyssa, Allison, thank you so much for putting together those critical puzzle pieces for us so that we continue to understand how this all works together. And Allison, I couldn't agree more. We are not going back. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and also note that at many of the speakers that you've heard before, some that are coming, including people like Ai-jen Poo, are here in their personal capacities, speaking from their personal experience and standing up on the courage that belongs to them. So we thank all of you, and let's continue this conversation. I want to call Fatima Goss Graves into the conversation. Fatima, I think you're there. Fatima and her organization, the National Women's Law Center Action Fund, know everything there is to know about the law. Trust me, because whenever I have questions, Fatima's who I call. She's given us a series of links to some of their essential guides. And Fatima, I want you to talk to us briefly about what's at stake for survivors in the legal realm right now.
I'm so grateful to be here tonight with you all. I mean, I'm coming to this work as a lawyer and an activist and a leader of the Law Center's Action Fund, and also as a survivor who's just really grateful to be in community tonight. So in this election, and in every election, survivors for sure deserve a chance to be represented by people who will fight for policies that allow them to live and learn and work with safety and with dignity. And I just want to say, across every indicator, whether we're talking about workplace safety or being safe at school or bodily autonomy or being able to access healthcare and healing services or consent education, there is no question here. Donald Trump's record is abysmal. We know what he did the first time he was president. He went after Title IX, the law that bans sex discrimination and harassment in schools, overlooking the voices of survivors again and again and again, and putting in place policies that are designed to push back harassment into the shadows. And it took us years to get a new rule. And Project 2025 basically says that they would once again weaken protections for survivors in school. He jammed through now Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court, the very same Supreme Court that has turned around and overturned Roe, unleashing legal chaos and creating a horrific public health crisis. And if he is given the chance, he could confirm as many as 3 more justices to the Supreme Court. He sought to overturn the Affordable Care Act, which for the first time did things like covering pregnancy care without co-pays, making it so millions of more people had access to healthcare, including mental health care. So we know what he did before. We also know what he would do if given the chance, because we have the hundreds of pages in Project 2025 written down. It would rescind regulations detailing employment protections for transgender workers. It isn't enough for them to overturn Roe. They would be going further, banning medication abortion, making it easier to refuse people care, reviving a 1800s law that would basically mean a backdoor abortion ban, banning books at a national level, energized through the sort of censorship that we have seen in the states that's focused specifically on LGBTQ and on consent and sexuality education. And on the contrast, you have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And you heard tonight about Vice President Harris's long record supporting survivors from her earliest days as a human to being a prosecutor to when she was an AG. She sought to implement processes that were trauma-informed. She supported the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights. She supported the Be Heard in the Workplace Act. And she used every tool that she had to address the crisis in abortion care in this country. And she has been clear it's a top priority that she will sign a reproductive freedom law. So survivors just deserve much more than we have been offered historically. We are not just stories for the public to consume. We are a powerful bloc. And with the knowledge and awareness and experience to elect those who can stand up for us, and when they're there, to be strong governing partners for them, to ensure that they are making decisions that promote the safety and healing for survivors. So you've heard already what you can do, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. You can vote, and you can vote early. You could check that off the list. You could take your sisters with you, take your cousin with you, your brother, take your fellow survivors, take your people. You can volunteer. I've been encouraging people to turn all the anxiety into action. Every time you find yourself doom scrolling, turn it into doing a thing, even if it's just one thing. So again, I'm grateful to have spent my night with you all, and grateful for all you have been doing and all I know you will do. Thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you, Fatima, for your ever-present wisdom and even more receipts. Listen, let's get after one of those single things that we can do. As you said, we heard you and Tarana speak about how important it is for survivors to become leaders in our political systems, just like our next guest, who's here to talk to us about something we can do right away, which is vote early. And you can also bring your friends. Check out the Get Ready With Us link in the chat, where we will post again at the end. You don't have to be fluent in TikTok, trust me. Get Ready With Us is simply a fantastic campaign to make sure that we're getting out there. So speaking of those leaders in our political systems, I'm proud to introduce you to one right now, Mercedes Malloy.
It's an honor to be here in this space. My name is Mercedes Malloy. I'm a survivor, activist, and founder of Safe Squad mobile app. After a traumatic event, I made it my personal mission to be a voice and provide a solution to alert mechanisms while in danger. I'm proud that the app serves as a resource among Gen Z, millennials, and individuals desiring peace of mind. Unfortunately, as survivors, we rarely get the justice we deserve. According to the Bureau of Justice, out of every 1,000 reports, 994 perpetrators will walk away free. Personally, I was forced to go to school with my abuser and was told by him that I made a mockery of the Me Too movement in my Title IX hearing. He received the minimum academic probation, and although I reported him to the police, he managed to evade the legal consequences to rebuild his life elsewhere. The aftermath of my assault left me to grapple with the economic and mental health repercussions alone. As a student survivor, I incurred expenses for medical and counseling and suffered the loss of tuition due to a necessary temporary leave of absence. Plus, I bore the responsibility of visiting Planned Parenthood and purchasing the morning after pill at my own expense. All of this feels unfair because it is unfair, but I believe that the cycle of abuse needs to be broken. It was important to take the significant step of becoming a political leader and representing the voice of survivors like me. As a result, I made the decision to run for city council in Scotts Valley. I'm enthusiastic about the prospect of seeing more survivors assume leadership positions in the United States. I'm proud to be supporting Kamala Harris in her candidacy for president on the United States on November 5th, 2024. The choice could not be clearer. Kamala Harris, a prosecutor and protector of victims of sexual assault and abuse, or Donald Trump, a perpetrator of sexual abuse. Electing her in November will be a big step forward, and so will be electing more of us. All of you people on this call who understand all of these issues and that will make our government a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes, for taking action in so many incredible and creative ways and for joining us tonight. Friends, siblings, this has been an incredible night. I want to let you know that these stories have been personal and real and transparent. They've been motivating to me. I'm sure they've been motivating and inspiring to so many of you. I've seen tears. I've seen lots of hearts in the chat. Most certainly, we are coming together knowing that when we fight, we win. I came out early in support of Vice President Kamala Harris when it was clear she was going to be at the top of the ticket. I did so in my personal capacity, as so many of the voices have done tonight, but I did so for a lot of reasons, for political ones, for policy reasons, because of some of the receipts about the bills that she sponsored and the work that she's done that you've heard tonight. But I also thought about my personal relationship with her, about the fact that when I was going through a very publicly challenging time, she picked up the phone and called me to make sure that I was doing okay, to encourage me to continue to grow in my leadership. And then most importantly, that when the people speak, she listens. And I don't know about you all. I don't believe that there are perfect politicians because there aren't perfect people, but I always want someone who I know will turn their ear to what the people truly need here and abroad and actually listen to what we demand, listen to what we need, and respond accordingly, not just with words, but with policy. And that's the kind of administration that every single American deserves. That's the kind of administration that we can get if we make sure we get out there and fight and win now through November the 5th and every day thereafter. Before you go, if you look in the comment section of the Zoom, you will find links once again to the Safe Voting Guide from Survivors for Kamala. And again, if you are feeling the need, please go to Me Too's Survivor Sanctuary pasted in the chat. We've also linked to places where you can get more involved, including door knocking and volunteering. And most importantly, talk to everyone you know. There's so much data that shows us that, yes, that text message, that outreach, that knocking on a friend's door, it matters more than any other kind of outreach there is. Whatever you are comfortable sharing, share a little, share a lot, but have those personal conversations, because that is what makes the difference, especially just 15 days out from the end of election season. Thank you to every single person who shared their stories tonight. To all of the organizers from Survivors for Harris, Survivors in Action, National Women's Law Center Action Fund, Care and Action, Survivors Justice Action, and the Meteor. We will leave this Zoom up for a few minutes so that you can copy and paste those resources that are in the chat. And playing us out is the sound of artist activist Gwen Levy with an original song. Gwen, take us home.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gwen Levy, and I'm a musician and activist. It's been such an honor to hear so many testimonies from this incredible group of survivors this evening. As a survivor myself of both childhood and adult sexual assault, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I decided to write a pro-choice country anthem that went viral. It's called Barefoot and Pregnant. It proves the healing power of music during dark times. As a Survivors for Harris ambassador, thank you so much to the Meteor and also to Survivors for Harris. As you said, we're going to end the night with one of my anthems of empowerment called Not the Girl Next Door. Thank you everyone so much for being here, and have a great rest of your night.
Long phase, boy craze, everybody's doing it days. Good grades, prom date, girl, don't give yourself away. Backseat, summer heat, sneaking out the house again. Played that suburban game that I could never win. I'm not the girl next door, I'm a goddess. The total package, if you can find my address. Might have been born on Main Street, but I don't live there anymore. Not the girl next door. Cheap thrills, booze, pills, higher than my electric bill. Be still, learn to chill, pushing a rock